Hello teachers, how are you? Wherever this video finds you, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to make a quick video to help you as a teacher learn the best way for where to find and start to implement some of the Ready for Rigor framework into your lessons, pulling from the curriculum and where can that be found. I'll be kind of pulling from Zaretta Hammond's, that's the author of The Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, where that Ready for Rigor framework is found. We did a book study on that last year. If you want a book, you don't have a book, let me know. I'll get in contact. I'm sure we got copies lying around somewhere. I'll get you a copy. But I wanted to start off before we dive into the curriculum to kind of see how it can be utilized in those spaces. I wanted to start real briefly with the Ready for Rigor framework isn't really a resource or curriculum necessarily idea. It's not, where can I find awareness in the curriculum? It's not really like that. I've tried to map it out. I'll show you a document in just a second, or if you're on this video, you've seen the document where it's possible that you might utilize some of the Ready for Rigor strategies in those particular areas of the curriculum map. And I'll talk through examples and show you examples of how that could look. First of all, if you need that, that is on page 17 of her book. But I'm going to jump to page 7, which was in the beginning introduction. And it talks about who this book is for. I just want to read the instructional leaders, which would be me, part. So principals and teacher leaders play a critical role in creating a school culture that allows for the care and nurturing of culturally responsive learning practices and spaces, both for students and teacher. So it's not my job as a curriculum leader to make all of those frameworks happen, but it is my job to help with the culture of your classrooms, and me being the curriculum coordinator, that the resources and what we have available can be utilized by you as the teacher for those culturally responsive practices in the Ready for Rigor framework. So I'm not saying that it's all just there, handmade, ready to go, but let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. You can do these strategies using the science curriculum. And so I'll kind of show you guys, hey, here are some areas where I think these are utilized best at. But for example, awareness isn't exactly something that happens in just one area of the curriculum map. This is something that you do for every lesson. It's a self-reflection, thinking about yourself and your biases, thinking about your students. So it doesn't fit into one spot necessarily. But some of the areas of the curriculum map do lend itself to that. Same for all these other ones. So I'll kind of go through and give one example from each spot of where a part of the curriculum and how you could, with these frameworks in mind, how they can kind of get pulled out. And hopefully that lets you see kind of that bridge, that I'm not giving you, hey, if you do these things, you're doing awareness. That's not how it works. But how you could use awareness, these strategies from her framework, how they kind of look within these areas. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with that. The first area is awareness. Know and own your cultural lens, understand the 3 levels of culture, recognize cultural archetypes, understand how the brain learns, and broaden your interpretations of culturally and linguistically diverse student learning behaviors. And so it's kind of knowing your students, knowing yourself, and how can you bring that out in your instruction. Where I want to kind of show an example of this is from the curriculum landing page, and specifically kind of the storyline and phenomena from one of our curriculums. So this is actually from our 6th grade curriculum map. This is Unit 2. So pretending that I'm a teacher, Unit 2 is about weather. And one of the things that the book does is it uses these images from California to talk about weather, because you have the ocean, which brings moisture. So then you can see California kind of green, but then there's this mountain range here. And then all of a sudden, now it's not as green. And so geographical land features are causing weather patterns. And so that's the introductory. Me thinking about my students and where they're at, it's like, hey, they're not from California. Many haven't been to California. I might have some discussions about that. It's a good example. But just thinking about, oh, and I think I deleted it. Just thinking about my students, hey, we're from the Midwest. I have a lot of immigrant students from Latin America. What's a better example that I could use in my class to engage the students and let them see something that maybe ties into their everyday life? I had this, I think I pulled it up on the other computer. So let me just find that same image. I think this one works. So a similar idea with how it was using geographical features to talk about weather, I could have a discussion, and this is cutting off Mexico. Let's not do one that's cutting off Mexico. All right, let's see if we can't get a bigger picture. Give me a okay, this is better. So I could have a discussion with my students, and instead of using the California example, which doesn't relate to many of my students, hey, we all live here in the Midwest. We have some students down here from Mexico, maybe in my classroom. And so we could have a discussion about how the geographical land features, such as the Gulf of Mexico, which evaporates and brings up a lot of moisture into the air, that gets brought straight up. And because of the way the Earth spins, it only comes up and over. The weather patterns doesn't actually bring weather this way. And so now you can see this dividing line right here where the moisture from the Gulf of Mexico doesn't go west. It's only watering these plains. And then you can have a whole discussion about agriculture, which happens in this area, and this area doesn't get it. And so you can actually see it on a map, and that might be more relevant to your students than the California example. And so I might make a shift in what the resource does to kind of hit where my students are at a little bit better. So that's one example of where me as a teacher, I was being aware of my students, my bias. I'd be like, I love California, and use that example, but it wouldn't really impact my students as much having that discussion as if I took a little bit of time, pulled up a different map, and we could talk about it that way. So there's an example for how the awareness strategy or framework could be utilized in my lesson planning. Next up, actually, I think I'm doing learning partnerships. So down here. So learning partnerships, I pulled up an example from, I believe, biology. But all of our resources and grade levels have some sort of introductory phenomenon. In middle school, it's the engage activities. High school, we have different activities that intro your concept, chapter, or whatever it's called. So for example, in biology, we talk about, they introduce the idea with this activity with how does a frog survive winter? So it shows a picture of a frog. It's in the frozen land, and yet somehow when spring comes around and it thaws out, the frog's fine. How's it doing that? The idea behind these aren't that the students have the answers yet, but through the work of all their learning, by the end, they have the tools necessary to answer it. But we do want them to sit and kind of think through this process. And so in the learning partnerships, maybe I'm not going to have the students do that alone. I'm going to have them work with a partner. Hey, brainstorm with the partner. Come up with a list of possibilities for why that might be. And then that really, so in the learning partnerships, balance giving students both care and push. I know students don't know the full answer, so I don't just want them to know the answer by themselves right from the get-go. And so partnering them with a student, give them a chance to brainstorm and come up with any possibility. There's no penalty for being wrong. This is just a brainstorming session. That gives them that care that, hey, you're not being judged right now because I haven't taught you yet, but I'm pushing you to really think and work together. What can you come up with? And then as a class, share it out. And now we have all these ideas we can explore as we go throughout the rest of the lesson. So learning partnerships, pair students up in partnerships or groups, and they're supporting each other. And the book goes into this a lot about the individualistic to communal types cultures. So it's really good stuff there. And I probably got the terminology wrong. Apologies. Next up is information processing. I wanted to highlight the explain CER activity. Most of our resources have some sort of explain question at the end in which students need to do an extended writing. This is typically you're introduced to an idea, you don't know, there's kind of following from the engage activities that we just talked about. At the end, now they have to write out the scientific explanation. And in these cases, these are a bit more individualistic. We want a student to be able to do this on their own to show their thinking and processing. But how can we do some information processing? How does that framework play into a CER? Here's an example from 8th grade that I think does a really good job. Let's look at information processing. Help students to process new content using methods from oral traditions. Provide students authentic opportunities to process content. So really that providing them authentic opportunities to process content. In our teaching, the students are going to be learning all the different aspects they need to write out that explained question. I have excellent graphic organizers. I'll show you an example right here. Graphic organizers that students can utilize to capture their thoughts as they go throughout the lessons. And then they'll be able to utilize these when they do their CER. But the book also, and this is what I wanted to show you guys, the book also has framework for, hey, we're about to do this CER. And instead of just saying, hey, go and write, there's actually a good prep work to it. Hey, what is your claim to the question that we're asking? In this case, why do space objects fall to Earth? What's your claim about this? What's some of the data from the labs that you can use to support the claim? What's some reliable evidence from our different texts that we use and videos that you saw that you could use as evidence? What scientific ideas, principles, and laws? I think they mentioned Newton's laws in that. So how are they, now they're collecting their thoughts. It gives them a reminder, hey, remember when you do a CER, keep these in mind. So now they have all this stuff that they've had time to process and put together before I send them off to go write it out. And I'm going to give them feedback, or maybe I pair up my students and have them give each other feedback on this content. So that way, when they go and write out a paragraph, boom, it's a much better result. And then we don't just leave it at that. I give feedback here. So throughout the year, it's going to get better and better. We're not just throwing them in the deep end. That is our information processing. Don't just assume, oh, they've learned it, I've taught it, answer it, please. Give me 5 sentences. No, we got to give support to that. And lastly, community of learners. Let's see. The thing that I want to pull up, and this is in every single one of my curriculum maps. In my curriculum maps last year, I started adding in these YouTube videos. These can be utilized you as a teacher in a number of ways. But one thing that you can always do is when you assign homework or at the end of a lesson, if you've got extra time, or just having some of these available for students, if they're stuck, and especially if they're at home or in a study hall, they're stuck on something and they have questions, how are they going to figure out the answer? Having them have these videos available to them because these tie into the instruction, now they have a place to go learn for themselves and then answer that question. They won't do it naturally by themselves. Most people don't. But by developing a culture or community of learners, we can reiterate that with them. Hey, I have these video resources available for you. So if I'm not available, you have tools at your disposal to go and research and discover your answers to your questions that you have. So that's a great resource that you could utilize to fall in with that kind of community of learners. I think this was the one I was talking about. Build classroom culture and learning around communal talk and task structures. Yeah. So create an environment that is intellectually and socially safe for learning. Hey, it's okay if you don't know the answer right now. Here's a great resource. Watch this and tell me what you think about that question after you've watched this video, because it has a great graphic. And if it's a 30-minute video, don't make them watch the whole thing. Say, hey, watch this minute right here. So utilize those to your advantage. And then there's some other ideas there. Okay, I think that's all I really wanted to share with you guys. Again, I want to reiterate, just because the Ready for Rigor framework can be found throughout the curriculum map, that doesn't mean that just because you're using the curriculum that those things are happening. The Ready for Rigor framework is an internal process for you as the teacher. So if you need to review it with the book, that was on page 17, and the book goes over each separate part. I'd be happy to meet and talk with you and brainstorm ideas. You guys have instructional coaches that are caught up to speed with this. They're meeting in their PLCs to discuss that. So let me know, let them know if you want some support on integrating that with your lessons and planning and classroom environment management style. And hopefully this showcased to you how you can use the curriculum and resources married with those Ready for Rigor frameworks. Okay, that is all that I got for today. We'll see you guys in the next video.